And the final important one in here that I want to show you is the hue versus luma. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to go in and not change the saturation or the hue, but it's going to change the intensity of brightness, the lumens, right, of a specific color. So with our greens, if I go here, select greens, bring up the intensity, we can bring up the exposure selectively on our greens or bring it down, right? So pretty cool and pretty unique, and it gives you a lot of coloring and stylizing capabilities to work with. Now I'm gonna bring down these greens a little bit because it's a little too saturated, and I want to finish adding our final refinement layers. So I think overall we can kind of make this even more tan and warm by boosting our temperature. Now what this is going to do is as I pull and boost up the temperature, we're going to start to go to more of a warm summer day versus down as a more cold wintry day, okay? So we're going to reset that to 0 and we're just going to boost this a little bit. Let's say maybe 10. We can see that's with the boost, without, with, without, with. We just want to subtly give even a little bit more warmth to our image to really make it feel like a warm, summery forest because that is the vibe and emotion that we're wanting to convey in the final product. The emotion and style we're wanting our viewer to feel when they're watching the final video. Now, let's say that some of these shots are looking perfect and we're ready to export, but there's a few in here that aren't really doing it. This catches my eye because her skin tone and really a lot of this image has a little bit of that gray tone that we don't want. When we get to the next image, this is looking good, okay? This one as well. I'm really liking the exposure, the contrast, and saturation. But this first one, it's a little bit dull. So what I'm going to do is bring out our blade tool. I'm going to select our adjustment layer. I'm going to cut where this clip is that we want to change. And I'm going to leave the rest of this one because the way this adjustment layer is affecting the rest of these clips is perfect. We just want to change the way it's affecting this first clip. So I'm going to highlight the cut that we made. And I'm going to boost some of the contrast, 15 points. I'm going to bring up a little bit of exposure because it's looking a little bit on the darker side. And now I'm going to bring up some of the vibrance to add more intensity to the colors in our video. So I'm going to bring that up 20 points. Okay, very subtly, just adjusting it. And now going to the next shot. Okay, that's looking a lot better. We still want to increase a little bit on our contrast, which is going to make the darks in the image darker and the brights in the image brighter. And let's do just 5 more points of saturation. Let's hit play. Perfect. That's looking a lot better. Now these images all really match. Let's see if there's any more standouts. Okay, this one is looking like it can use some more depth in the dark parts of the frame as well. Because this looks great, contrast, saturation. This one's looking a little bit gray. So let's do our same technique as we did on that first clip. Bring out our blade tool, cut our adjustment layer selectively just above this green clip that we want to change the parameters on. Let's bring down some of these shadows to create a little bit more depth in the dark parts of the frame. Let's add a little bit more saturation to bring up the colors in the overall image. And now let's see. Okay, great. That's looking pretty good. Of course, I could spend more time fine-tuning this, but I want to keep moving forward here so we can get into some more important techniques. So now that those main important steps are done, and as an editor, we want to do everything in our power, use all the techniques that we have to further create a world for our viewer to go to when they're experiencing our video. Now, there's a certain softness to this project in particular. There's a certain organicness and naturalness that I want to really create at the beginning as our video starts, almost like the beginning of a story, and a nice gradual ending. And one way to do that is to create a fade in and a fade out on a project. I really don't use these very often, but for this project in particular, I think it's going to work pretty well and just be a nice little subtle way to start the video and way to end the video. So right now, our video starts like this. But I think if we add just a subtle cross dissolve at the beginning, it's going to look pretty nice. So there's two ways to do this. We can select our clip, go to our effects panel, and type in cross dissolve. This is going to give us the cross dissolve transition that we can drag and drop to the beginning of our clip. That kind of creates a nice little visual intro. Okay, we miss her first note. We don't really see her striking her first note. So there's two things we can do. We can either select and make this dissolve shorter, or what we can do is look at our whole timeline and we can select all of the clips in our timeline by doing Command A, and then we can scoot our entire edit over and we can increase the beginning of this clip to make more time for this new cross dissolve that we added to finish before the actual song starts. Let's see what that looks like. So now we have just a few extra frames that we added to compensate for the fade that's coming in here and still get this first strike that she plays at this opening note right here. And now the second option we can do to add the cross dissolve is to first delete this transition that we dropped on and bring up our pen tool. Okay, I'm going to hit P to bring up the pen tool. And we're going to use this pen tool to manually go in, and it's very similar to the way we use it to create the time remapping by speeding up and slowing down our footage in our previous project. But instead, we don't need to go down to show clip frames and change anything down here like we did for time remapping. It's always going to be displaying the opacity as a default. So all of the clips in my timeline, this line on the clip is always going to be displaying the opacity parameters. So I'm going to bring up my pen tool. I'm going to click where I want the cross dissolve to end, and I'm going to click where I want it to begin. I'm going to hit V to bring up my normal arrow selection tool, and I'm going to drag that down. And what that does is the same exact thing as this cross dissolve function, but we're going to have a little bit more control by right-clicking any of the points, clicking Bezier, right-clicking the beginning point, and we can use this lasso to change the angle and speed and trajectory, if you want to call it that, of our crossfade. So, for example, we could start it really going very slow for a long time and then to finish. Okay, that's one style. We can kind of extend this a little bit and smooth this out. We don't want to create too drastic of a curve here, but I'm going to create a nice looking slope so that there's a nice gradual introduction to the image. Okay, bring up the sound. Perfect. So that's the second option that you can use just to have even a little bit more control. Now, to end the video, I want to do it the same way that we started. So let's go to the end of our sequence. And we have the final note of the performance. So just on that note, I'm going to create a keyframe. And at the end of our clip, I'm going to drag it down. Then I'm going to right click these keyframes, click Bezier, kind of make a nice little curve. So we've got something with a little bit of taste and class to it. And let's see what it looks like. So that matches up a lot more with our audio versus the original that just cuts to black. So that cross dissolve is perfect for this kind of scenario. We just finished the selects phase, the rough edit phase, and the second edit, refining, color correcting, stabilization phase of this learning lesson. Now it is time to export our content for the proper media platform. So I'm going to select my timeline here. I'm going to hit Command M, or I can go up to File, Export Media. I'm going to make sure H.264 is selected. And I'm going to go to the presets here. Now, let's say I want to go to YouTube. Now, mine was shot in 4K. So I'm going to choose this YouTube 4K function. And of course, I did mention in the previous edit, a little bit of a hack is even if your footage is 1080p and you're going to upload it online to YouTube or Facebook or Vimeo, and you want it to have just a little bit better settings, you can add the preset at 4K, even if it's not a 4K. This is gonna compress your footage less outside of the export during the exporting process from your editing software, and it's gonna compress your footage less as well during the upload process when YouTube and these online platforms do their crunching, compressing, and optimizing process on anything that you upload to their sites. So we're gonna select 4K. Now you can see there's these black bars at the top of the page. That is not what we want for this specific video. So I'm going to click match source. That's going to change the aspect ratio to properly fit our sequence. Then I'm going to go to audio and I'm going to make sure our bit rate is set to 320. Everything else is set to high. And then I'm going to go to render. I'm going to click render at maximum depth, use maximum render quality. And lastly, before we click the output name, for this example, I want to show you a really great technique on exporting. And what that is using a queue versus exporting something directly out of your editing software. You can add it to an external queue in another software, and this will allow you to export multiple edits at the same time. So traditionally, I'd choose where I want it to go, I'd hit save, and then I would click export. And then a window would pop up, and then with a loading bar, and I wouldn't be able to do anything in my editing software. I'd have to wait for the export to finish. Now, with this extra step, because we're working our way, becoming editing ninjas, I'm going to navigate to our proper editing folder that we set up at the very beginning of the project. I'm going to create a new folder called exports, and I'm going to title this violinist YouTube V1. Okay. And I'm going to hit add to queue. What this is going to do is it's going to take all the data, all the information from our sequence with the proper export settings, add it to Adobe Media Encoder, and it's going to allow for me to continue to operate inside my editing software and make changes. Now, what I want to do for this example is export again. And this time I'm going to set my settings for Instagram. So I'm going to be exporting my YouTube version and my Instagram version at the same exact time. So let's go to preset. And I'm going to go to mobile device 1080p. And of course, I'm going to click match source so our aspect ratio is correct. I'm going to go to audio. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to go to bitrate, hit 320. I'm going to choose maximum render depth and maximum quality. And then I'm going to go up to the output name and I'm going to type in violinist, violinist, Instagram version 1. I'm going to hit save and then I'm going to add it to the queue. Now we have our 2 exports ready to go, and all we have to do is hit the start queue button. So I'm going to start the queue right now. Boom. In the bottom, you have a little heads up panel that's showing where it is in the export. And while that's happening, we can continue to make changes, or we can continue to edit a different project entirely. So while this is exporting, I just kind of wanted to talk about something. Editing is so much of it is about patience. Right now it's like, okay, I got to wait for this to export. And then you're editing, it's like, okay, I got to wait for my clip to render. And then you're like, okay, well, I got to find the right shot. And a lot of it is a time consuming, kind of slow trial and error process of maybe this is it. Maybe this will work. Maybe this is the clip. And it takes a very, I don't know, flexible mindset and level of patience and acceptance to really become a good editor that doesn't really just know how to do the techniques, but to create something different and special and something that's uniquely you to your creative style, and to find your own aesthetic and find your look that people see that and they say, wow, okay, there's something interesting about this video. That takes a lot of patience and time, and sitting in front of the computer and freaking wanting to like throw the laptop out of the window sometimes, like when your editing software crashes after you've been doing 20 minutes of work and haven't hit the save button and having to restart. And I mean, going through the years and years of doing that. And then at the end of the day, I always have such a big payoff and such a big reward in my chest, and this feeling of proudness and satisfaction and excitement about when I do have the final product that took so many hours of patience and working 30 minutes on a 5-second sequence, or 3 hours or 3 days on a 5 or 10-second sequence. So have patience, be okay with being slowed down, I want to say, by the technology, because sometimes our brain is working and we know what we want to do, but to translate that out of the brain into the body, into the keyboard, through the computer, get the right shot in the right place with the right effect and sound and filter and timing takes a lot faster than, oh, I know what I want to do. And that takes a lot of practice, allowing that process to happen and not getting too frustrated with the technology that's kind of standing in the way that you're trying to work with. So, just something to think about as we continue to move forward and progress as video editing ninjas in this course. All right, and now we have our final exports. We have our YouTube version. This is ready to upload online. It's full res at 4K. And then we have our Instagram version that's a smaller size. And that wraps things up for this learning lesson. Now, I want you to finish creating your second draft edit using your own footage or the violinist footage that we've been working on for this section. Remember to use the techniques like shot choice, shot ordering, shot length, pacing, cutting on movement, coloring, and stabilization to really improve on the second draft of your edit before you export it. So remember, with shot ordering, choice, length, we're deciding what to use depending on the story we're trying to tell and the emotional response we're trying to create in our viewer. We're going to cut on movement to make our cuts as invisible and seamless as possible. We're going to color our clips in a selective way to really choose what kind of colors and tones we want to enhance and increase. And we're going to then stabilize, or you're going to then stabilize all of your shots so that everything is looking really smooth. When that's done, just like me, you're going to export your video, you're going to upload it online, and you can share your video URL in the Q&A section to get feedback from other students. Or if you want to give feedback to another student's video edit, you can respond to their post in the Q&A section. And that wraps it up for this learning lesson, and I will see you in the next chapter.